Hey, F50 Women. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are with Julie Geske Peer. She is the president and founder of Peer Performance Solutions. She has extensive experience as a manager at a high level and is the author of 5 Senses for Success, Strategies to Thrive in Any Arena. I haven't read the book yet, but it's so interesting. And I also love that you talk about you've learned a lot of your lessons the hard way. Thank you for being here. We're looking forward to talking to you.
Oh my gosh, Julie, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Good. So we just want to get to know who you are, Julie. Tell us about who you were as a younger woman, what you love to do, just whatever insight will help us to know you a little better.
Sure. So as a younger woman in my teen years, I came from a slightly dysfunctional family. It wasn't as catastrophic as some families of origin can be. And yet there were some real situations that caused me to feel a real lack of confidence. As a teenager, I was attacked on the street by somebody that I knew, though I didn't know at the time of the attack right away that it was somebody I knew until I was able to get away and run. That person stalked me for a while and attacked me again. That combined with this slightly dysfunctional situation, honestly, I think I was born more sensitive in general as a person. So all of these things combined led me into a number of years of making some poor choices. For instance, I quit high school the middle of my senior year. Yes, that's crazy.
No.
Yes, I did. And some other questionable choices throughout my teens and early 20s. I did get married in my early 20s. I had a daughter and then got divorced. I had what I call a slow launch. I didn't go to college after high school. I went later. I got my BA as a 31. When I was 31, I earned it, or graduated with it. I later went on to grad school, got remarried. I'm with my current husband, 28 years. We adopted a child out of foster care. He was 8 at the time he moved in with us, 9 when the adoption was formalized. That brought some challenges. So I think of perseverance as an important part of my journey. When I was young, I loved to read. I constantly read
Okay.
fiction books, but I also read a lot of nonfiction books too. And that's what inspired me to ultimately write my nonfiction book. As a 20-year-old and young adult, actually, the way I met my current husband, I love to dance. So dancing has been a theme throughout my life as well.
Now, the person who attacked you, and you can share if you want to, did you ever figure out why? Did you care why? Did it even matter?
No. So the way this happened, I was walking home on my paper route. I was 13 or 14 and walking home, walked by a restaurant and he had been standing behind the restaurant. I didn't see him. I just felt him grab me from behind, cover his hand over my mouth and an arm around my waist and pull me back behind the restaurant.
Wow.
I hung there for a couple of minutes, kicking and flailing, trying to get away. And for whatever reason, ultimately, he did let me go after a minute or two. And as I ran, I saw who it was, and it was a classmate and somebody who had been part of my neighborhood group of kids that would play together often as children. Well, I ran to a house of a woman whom my mother knew that was very close to where I was. This is just one of those visuals that will never leave me in my life. She answered the door and I literally burst into her house without asking permission. I was just that terrified. And as I burst into her house, I noticed all these owls hanging from the ceiling. They were owls made out of foam balls with felt things on them. It's just this weird, like you just remember weird things, right? Yes, they were hanging there. Well, she called my mother. I could tell by the look on her face that she was shocked because she said, "You want me to send her home?" She ended up walking me home. My mother wasn't going to come get me or deal with it. And that just gives you a little sense of how my family of origin was. And because of that, as I continued to do my paper route over subsequent days, when this person was following me, I didn't feel like I had any recourse or ability to deal with it.
Right.
Anyway.
No support.
Ultimately, he did pin me up against a fence another time and grabbed me inappropriately in various ways. And ultimately it did let me go as I was screaming. But then for whatever reason, it stopped, thankfully. That whole series of events left me very unsettled and uncertain.
Okay. And so would you call that the one thing that affected you most, that changed everything in your life? Or is there something else along the way? I know you said you learned a lot from different things.
Good.
Is
So
there one that you can think of?
I don't know if I can point to one. I
Okay.
think that's one of the pivotal
Okay.
situations that impacted me. I think being born a girl was one. My mother, as my brother came 2.5 years later, was obviously more into having a boy child than a girl child. Being made to be the much more responsible child in the household of the two of us, I was responsible for everything my brother did and my own stuff. That kind of came into play. Later, divorce is no easy, nor is single parenthood. I was a single parent for a number of years. My daughter was 1.5 when I got divorced and 5 when I got remarried. During those years, I was also going to school and working full time. It was quite chaotic, but that was part of my journey that was complex. Later, when we adopted the child out of foster care, our son, that is not an easy task either, not by any fault of his. But by the journey he'd been through to that point. So when he moved in with us when he was 8, it was his 14th known move in his childhood.
Wow.
So that's a lot of chaos for a young person. And there was very little trust in him. It took a lot of years to kind of work through what had happened with him early on. There were many things that had happened, and those aren't my stories to tell. We as a family had to figure out how to work through that for him, to support him, while also parenting my daughter for my first marriage. And so that was another hurdle to work through and over. Later in my life, I ended up in a 2.5 to 3 year period where I ended up having a lot of health issues in a row. So this is odd. I've had 4 different cancers. I was extremely lucky to have very early stage cancers, all of them. So I'm, as far as I know, cancer free today. But that wasn't easy to go through. There were some different surgeries and radiation. I didn't have to have chemotherapy, but I went through a number of things around that. Because of some of the challenges in raising our son and the way my husband and I weren't dealing with it super well, we had a period of separation. So there have been a number of hurdles throughout my life. I mean, we got back together later. We were able to work through it, but it's just been interesting. And now we are raising our first granddaughter. She's 11 and we've had her since she was 1. She has a disability. So that's another interesting challenge we're learning from and working through. I'd say they've been periodic throughout my life.
You went in waves. You got all your pivots and waves
Yes.
all the way through.
Uh-huh.
So do you think that the childhood you had prepared, I feel even a little bit sick saying it because it's mean, but do you feel like that prepared you for raising your daughter, your foster son, your son, and now your granddaughter? Do you feel like, wow, okay, I went through that when I was younger and now I understand?
Yeah.
Or
So
I can do. Yeah.
I do. I think it was 100% preparation. I'm of the mindset that whatever difficult things we go through in life, as horrible as they are during the time and as challenging as they are and as much emotion, anger, and depression as we may have, ultimately, if we take them as springboards to learn from and move forward, that is how we evolve in life. I am grateful for everything that has happened to me along the way. Weird to say I'm grateful for being attacked on the street. Weird to say I'm grateful for cancers or the challenges of a youth that didn't trust because of rightful reasons. He had had a lot of chaos. I think that every step along my journey has prepared me for exactly where I am today. Because I wasn't protected as a child, I felt very strongly about protecting my children as a mother and grandmother, now raising one. That has played out in certain events in life. I don't do it in a way that is taking responsibility from them. If they do wrong, I want to hold them accountable. If they have not done wrong and have something done that impacts them in a way it shouldn't, I'm going to be there to protect them. It wasn't until years later, that event where the lady walked me home, that I realized as a mother, I would never have said, send her home. I would have been right there. Yeah. So I just can't even fathom fully where my mother was at that time. And my mother has passed away. So, I'm not trying to speak ill of her because I think She also came from some challenging upbringing, but it's hard for me to understand. The best I can think is she had kind of a hands-off approach of parenting, tough it out kind of parenting. She probably didn't know what to do either, right? Try to be understanding of that at this point in time before I had a lot of anger. I think they are lessons that have helped me get to where I am today.
And I'm learning that looking back, our parents and our grandparents, they had a whole different life circumstance, and the things that they just weren't taught or they had to endure. They figured, well, I endured it. Why don't you? So get over it and move on. So yeah, it's hard, but it's really nice to get to the point where you realize they probably didn't know any better.
Right.
No excuses, but
there has been a history of thinking boys will be boys, and that excused a lot of behavior that today we are much more savvy about not excusing.
Right.
But it was the norm back at a certain point in time.
Yeah. So if you can, what did cancer teach you?
At the time that I came down with my first cancer, it was about a 2.5-year period. I was working in an organization where I was out of sync with the leadership. I was a manager of a team, and there were 2 levels of leadership above me. And I, especially the top level of leadership, did not jive, if you will, with their mode and method of leadership. It was also a job that was overburdened on each party, not just me. And I felt that a lot for my team. And I felt that myself. As example, I had 20-hour day where I was at work for a 20-hour period. And that was not an atypical thing. Maybe not 20, but 15, something like that. So it was very overwhelming. And at the time, I was just trying to do my job and stick with it. But as I had the first cancer and then another cancer and then another cancer, it really started helping me understand that it was kind of a cancer with this environment that I learned. I don't have a tie that says this environment caused my cancer. But I do think that if we let ourselves remain in situations that aren't healthy for us, it can impact us. So I have a family history of cancer. That certainly comes into play. But I was young at this time. I was in my 40s. I think of that as young now as I approach my
right.
Some people may not agree with me, but I learned that life is precious. I think at the time I was just kind of trying to do my job. It was also part of the period where we were having some trouble in our marriage. And there were a lot of things aligning. So that probably is part of it as well. All of it kind of pulling together. And through the cancers, I learned the lesson that I'm not going to allow myself to stay in a place that feels unhealthy for me, whether that's a work environment, whether that's a marriage situation, a friendship, whatever it may be. I am going to take the steps to get myself into a better place. It gave me some strength that I probably didn't have before that. There's the treatment, and those aren't fun. Getting surgery and radiation. It's not like anybody's going to say, please just sign me up for that. I think what it taught me is strength to really center in what's good for me. And by centering in what's good for me, I think that improves what's good for those around me. So we all, each of us as individuals, have a circle of influence, whatever that looks like, whether it's family, friends, community, workplace. And how we show up every day does impact other people. And so by centering it in what was good for me, I also gave out better than when I wasn't in a happy place. I was sometimes not nice to my family because I would take some of that stuff home from work. I think that was the lesson that I learned from that cancer period.
How we show up affects other people. Yeah, that's a powerful one. Yeah, because it's not just about you at any point in time.
We all have that circle around us, whatever it looks like. And we can sometimes talk ourselves through why we shouldn't fix things for ourselves, because we probably are less kind to ourselves often than we are to others. But I learned through that time, if I do that, I'm actually being unkind to other people as well, because it goes up that way.
That's so nice. That's a powerful one to take with you. Because like you said, a lot of women, they're giving and giving away and not treating themselves so nice.
Right.
Yeah. did you have anyone to help you through that? And that could extend through any period of time, but even through your cancer period, did you have someone to support you and to help you?
I did. I had lots of support in general. I've had therapy multiple times along the way. So that has been a big thing that has helped me, especially in the wave that I had in my early or late 20s to early 30s was really helpful in helping me heal from some of that past stuff that I talked about. I can talk about it today without getting emotional because I've worked through that. I will give credit to my current husband. What he has given me is true love that is unconditional, which I didn't have as a child. That has helped me immensely to grow and evolve as a person too. When I was sick, and the cancer period was not the only time I've had some physical stuff in my life that needed surgeries. He has been there every step of the way. Even when we were separated, he was always there for anything I needed. I had one kind of day surgery while we were separated, and he was there with me. So he always has been a support. My adult children are supports where needed. They weren't adults at the time of the cancers, but they are there to support whatever is needed. Our son comes and helps around the home. Our daughter has helped me with things like, she's a marketing mind, so she helped me around book stuff. And I mean, it's just, I feel very grateful of the many people along the way that have been support to me. And I try to give that back because I feel like that's important, the circle of that. I also have had many leaders that I've learned lessons from along the way, and colleagues that I've learned lessons along the way. You know, I think of those as supporting my journey. I'm not saying they are only there to support my journey. That isn't it at all. I hope that I also supported them in their journeys, and that is important to me. But I think that sense of community is how we live humanity well, right? When we have community, whatever that looks like for each individual, it is how we connect and engage and live out spirit. I guess all along the way, I felt like I've had that at different points in time.
That's great to know, because sometimes, you know, I was listening to your story and I was thinking, wow, she did all that all alone. How'd she get through that? And so it's nice to remember that we all need some kind of support, even, and therapy's okay. It's okay when you go to an organized organization or a purposeful, what's that called? What am I looking for? You go there on purpose to someone who is there to help you through it.
Yeah. And I would say too, just for anybody listening, I started out with one therapist and it wasn't syncing. This was in my late 20s. For whatever reason at that time, even before the cancer period where I learned more of my inner strength, it just didn't feel right. And I went to a different one, and he actually ended up being part of our journey later when we had family issues related to the adoption. We went as a family. He ended up being a big character in the journey of life, and he was amazing. So if you feel like it's not the right person, listen to that and find the right person, because the right person will help.
Right. Yes. And that's important to hear, because once you go to one and they're not working.
You might think therapy is not for me. I did have that thought a little bit, but I thought, well, maybe I'll try another one, because I still felt so hurt and kind of mired in this anger inside. And I just felt like I needed to do something. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask, and that's pretty young to know that you need therapy. Did somebody say, oh, you should go to therapy? Because I don't think I would have thought of that.
Nobody said that.
No.
When I was in my first marriage, I was 26 to 27 and a half when I was in my first marriage. It was not a long marriage, but we had been together longer before that. The challenges in the marriage caused me to start to go. I actually had my ex-husband to also go, but he did not choose to, part of the reason why we ended up divorced. But it was from that point forward that I realized this is actually helping me as I dealt with my divorce. And then I realized how much past stuff I also had to deal with.
You think that it's just this situation that's my issue, but then you realize, oh, I left that in the trunk.
Impacting today.
Yes. Yeah. So when this unconditionally loving husband came into your life, did you accept that unconditional love, or was that even challenging for you?
That was hugely challenging for me. I tested him, and probably the first couple of years of our marriage, not like I was consciously saying I'm going to test him.
Right.
But looking back at it, I can see that's what I was doing. I would push. It's kind of what our son ended up doing to us when he came. I would push away. I would be mean in some ways to see if he was going to stick through it, if he was going to be there. And honestly, that's exactly what ended up happening with our son. And so I probably could recognize that because I had done it. He was just such a calm, accepting, and loving soul that he just handled it. Certainly, we've had times when we've argued along the way, 28 years, of course. When I was at my worst, he was at his best. For somebody to be able to do that is, to me,
yeah, not sort of get pulled into the void with you. So looking back at your younger self, what would you now tell her? What is the one piece of advice you would want her to have?
I would say believe in yourself. It's hard because I really felt so uncertain and unconfident as a youth and a young adult. Yet, for whatever reason, I think it's spirit given. I had this drive, I had this belief in something different and a better way. And so I kept trying odd things sometimes, like quitting high school.
Right.
But I kept trying to do things to figure it out, whatever it was. I didn't really even have a clear vision of what it was. But if I had known that inside of me, that drive, again, I'm very spiritual, I believe comes from God. And it comes from, there's something inside of me that has purpose, as there is something inside of every one of us that has purpose. Yeah. And if we have these messages that keep coming back to us about something, moving towards something, it's probably because it relates to that purpose somehow. And so believing in that earlier, when I was a teenager, I wrote poetry. In my younger adulthood, I dabbled a lot in fiction writing, and I had lots of fiction books in process that I never finished. And it wasn't until I got to the idea of I'm later in life and I really starting to think about what's the legacy I leave behind, that I wanted to do something under the nonfiction umbrella because I felt like that could benefit someone. That desire to write has always been there. I wasn't always listening to it as well as I could. I wasn't always believing in myself as much as I hope to in the future. I'm still evolving on it, I'd say. But if I could have sooner, maybe I could have gotten to where I am today sooner. And maybe then I could have had even more impact by the time I'm this age, you know? So I think that the sooner we believe and listen to ourselves and start following our true path, the sooner we have the impact that we're meant to have in this world.
I've been grappling with that idea, that question about growth when you're born. Have you ever seen the Groundhog's Day, the movie Groundhog's Day with
I think so, but
that famous actress?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I can't remember her name. But anyway, she wakes up every morning and it's just new. Every morning she doesn't remember anything that happened before. And so I was thinking to myself, even as we share these stories and we try to help younger women and help us older women, maybe it's just meant to be that every generation sort of has to wake up.
Right. It's true. It might be true. That might be part of our journey here in life. Yeah.
And then as you're talking to your younger self and believing in yourself and really knowing that you have a purpose, God has a purpose for you. How do we take your golden nuggets and help them to evolve faster? I don't know. I'm just asking a question right off the top of my head. How can we help them?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have a full answer. I don't know if I had somebody when I was a teenager who was telling me a different way could exist. Yeah. I don't know if I would have listened at that time. Hopefully by us sharing our stories, and you do a wonderful job of that with all the many wonderful women you have on your podcast. Maybe by sharing our stories, they learn little tidbits along the way, and maybe it shortens their journey just a bit. That's the best I have.
Right.
Because we all do have our own journeys and we all do have our own way of learning in this life. But I believe that each and every one of us is here to impact the world in a positive way. And when we step into that, it's a beautiful thing. I can tell you that when I have had those points of clicking, times when our son has thanked us for the things we went through with him, or times when our granddaughter hugs us because she's so happy. When those moments happen that you know you've had that positive impact, it's so powerful and so soul-filling that I want that for everybody. I guess that's all I can really say about that.
That's beautiful to remember. And I think everybody should put that somewhere on their fridge or in their pockets, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's having so many challenges, sort of like what you shared with her pastor and her family and people who are treating her currently, how she was in the past, just to be able to inspire her with what you just said and saying, one day you're going to look around and somebody's going to say, thank you, or hug you. Tell us about you now, because we heard little bits, but tell us about you now and tell us about what's next. Tell us about what you're doing, about your books. We want to hear about it all.
Perfect. I am currently the owner, and I founded it, Peer Performance Solutions, since 2014. And I work with partners to serve clients to help lift performance. That can look like several different things. I have leadership as one of the areas that I work with people on, leadership coaching. I'm an executive coach, and I'm also an emotional intelligence coach. My second area is relationship and communications, because of all these lessons I've learned along the way. And I'm also a conflict mediator. So I'm a qualified neutral for the state of Minnesota. So that's kind of my second area. And the third area is accountability and goal achievement, because when I'm working with leaders, executives, that seems to be a big challenge area, because it's the hard part of leadership. You don't want to have difficult conversations with your staff. It's not fun. I've actually created a model called the accountability factor, where I help teach how to hold people accountable. Prior to starting my business, the last two leadership roles I had been hired to repair situations that had gone poorly. So there was poor staff engagement, there was poor client engagement and satisfaction. So I went in to help repair the situation. In both cases, I believe I was successful based on the accolades I would hear from my team, my peers, and the leaders in the organizations. When I went into business, I really wanted to do that as part of my business because I enjoy it. It is so wonderful when you can see a team build on the strengths they already have, where some of those other challenges, interpersonal challenges or accountability challenges, are getting in the way. Helping teams and organizations move past those and build on the strengths is something I find very empowering. I enjoy it and get value out of it, while I'm also trying to help them with their situation. That's what I do in business. I'm a conflict mediator. I volunteer for the Minnesota Department of Human Rights as a mediator, and I also volunteer for Conflict Resolution Center as a mediator, and I do mediation sometimes in my business as well. Personally, my husband and I live in a suburb of the Twin Cities with our 11-year-old granddaughter and our dog, who just turned 13. We're worried about how long we have her, but that's the circle of life, if you will. My adult children, my daughter is married, living in a different part of the Twin Cities, and my son is engaged and raising his second daughter, who is 7. They are expecting another baby in March.
Wow.
We will have a grandson in March. I'm called Nana by my grandchildren, even the one who lives with us. So it's really a unique situation that we have. We are the paternal grandparents, and we share custody with the maternal great-grandparents. When the granddaughter was very young, the mom left her at the great-grandparents' house because she was partially raised by them. Okay. My son and the mom were in a difficult part of their adulthood. There was some criminal activity and chemical situations. And so we partnered with them to do a co-custodianship, and it's actually a permanent custodianship. Early on, they were primary because my husband and I were working, and they were able to stay home with her. They were already retired.
Right.
And then when she was 4.5, we became primary, but we've always been back and forth. We work together very well. It's actually quite a beautiful, unusual arrangement that keeps both both sides of her family in her life, which is wonderful.
So important. Yeah. So important for her to connect and know everybody and know everybody's okay with everybody else.
So back to your question, the reason
Yeah.
we did Nana and Papa is because we didn't want them to have to do great grandma and great grandpa. So they originally started calling themselves grandma and grandpa, and we were Nana and Papa. But then Melina, as a 3-year-old, decided they were grandmama and Boppy. So that's what they are called.
Okay.
And
I like that.
I know, it's so
Cute. Very cute. And now back to what you do for a living as a conflict mediator. I'm curious, what's one of the most challenging, if there is one, conflict that you have run into? Is there any situation that pops up and you're like, okay, here we go again. This is not going to be easy.
Some of the conflicts that I mediate through the Minnesota Department of Human Rights are challenging because they are situations where somebody is saying that their rights for
Whatever reason. Okay.
Could be race or gender or sexual orientation have been compromised.
Right.
And so those are very challenging sometimes because some of the stories that I might hear are really difficult stories. Okay. And my role is to remain neutral. Because I think back to your earlier point, my journey along the way with all the difficult things I've had has allowed me to be in that neutral space, even in those kinds of situations. In the community mediation room, there can be a lot of swearing or people pounding on tables. That doesn't impact me. I'm able to remain calm. I'm able to remain in that neutral space. Mm-hmm. And really my goal in those is to help the parties figure out what will work for both of them. Mm-hmm. And try to help them find a middle ground, if you will. They can be challenging. And I can't share specific stories, of course, but they can be really challenging. I also find it very fulfilling because a lot of the time we can get to an agreement. And when that happens, I'm so grateful. Before I go into every mediation or even this, like a podcast interview, I try to center myself in a spiritual space. I pray and ask for guidance on my words and my thoughts and how I work with people. And so I try to show up that way, even in the challenging situations, whatever they may be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And also what I'm learning from you, or what I'm being inspired with, is that I got to work with a nonprofit who worked with young adults, in their 17 to 20-year-old, helping them get experience in the construction trades. And I was so inspired. I wanted so much for them. But I came from a background that was very gentle, very suburban, nothing really tragic. But I knew these young people could do great things if they focused, if they did some things. But there were some other ladies who worked with me who didn't really grow up where I grew up, sort of connected because they understood things that I just didn't understand. When they were making excuses or doing things that I couldn't really intuit, they were like, yeah, no, this is what he's doing. He's really not doing that. And I realized that oftentimes your background and the things you went through, like you're sharing, really prepares you to be able to help other people in very powerful ways. It doesn't feel good going through that stuff at the time. It hurts. It sucks. You don't want it. But I just so appreciate when you come out the other side like you did, Julie, where you're like, you know what? That doesn't bother me. I can sit in these mediation sessions and I'm here to help you both to come to a good place. So appreciate where you came from. It really sucks, but God bless you that you persevered. You didn't give up. You said you're almost 60. Is that what you said?
I will turn 60 in January.
Yeah, 60 in January. You're still pushing ahead and you have so much to share and so much to give. Thank you for doing that. We could give up. We could just be like, my life sucked and it's done. Tell me, let's get a little bit of nuggets from your playbook. Tell us about one book you would advise all women to read.
Okay. I have to say it's a newer book. It was published earlier this year and I'm still in process of reading it. Okay. But I knew as I started it, this is the one I want to talk about here. It is Dr. Nicole LaPera's book called How to Do the Work, Recognize Your Patterns, heal from your past, and create yourself.
Okay.
Is what I've read so far extremely empowering to women and really helping them understand things that could have impacted them along the way. I haven't gotten to the part fully yet about how to overcome that, but I am certain that I'm going to learn a lot of things in this book that will still help me. I've been through some things and gotten over some things, but I still think I have more to do and learn. This is a great book.
Yeah. Yes. We all, it doesn't, I don't care, 50, 60, 70, we all have so much to learn. We can be so much better.
Yeah.
And until you're gone, don't stop trying.
Right? I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. The idea is that we're learning because the more we learn, the more impact we can have in a positive way. Yeah.
Just because we want to know you a little bit better, what is one thing that you can't miss doing every day?
Reading. That is absolutely something I do literally every day of my life.
So you actually open the physical book. Are you
I'm a Kindle person.
Oh, you're a Kindle. Okay.
Yep. I read literally every day, fiction, nonfiction, or both. So I often will do some fiction or nonfiction in the morning. And then when I want kind of relaxed time later, we'll do fiction. I literally do it every day of my life. I also have coffee every day of my life.
Okay. Yes. Coffee is wonderful. I just gave it up, Julie, though. And
it's
been a difficult week because I find like it's making my bones hurt. That sounds strange, but it does. When I don't drink it, my joints don't hurt as much.
Well, that's good.
Your body changes. But tomorrow you drink an extra cup for me.
I will.
Good. You did say that you were an avid reader. You were a voracious reader. I think you described yourself. Did you tell us about your book?
Not yet, but
okay. Yes, we have to hear about that one because I love that it's strategies to thrive in any arena.
What I did in the 5 senses for success is I took the original 5 senses of see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, and I shifted them into more meaningful, intentional, and deep senses of observe, listen, feel, engage, and appreciate.
Wow, okay.
And I did that because the senses are how we experience the world. I realize and acknowledge that not everybody realizes all senses, but whatever senses we do realize, it's how we experience the world. Often the way we use them is somewhat passive. We can hear sounds without paying attention to them, see items without paying attention to them. And I really felt that this framework was given to me by God one day as I had been ruminating about the concepts I wanted to put into a book. I woke up one morning saying, the senses, the 5 senses is the framework. And it just kind of evolved from that moment. So why I think it's important for us to use these senses in a more intentional way is because when we want to accomplish most things in life, we have to interact with other people to do that. Whether that is have a long-term relationship, parent well, work in our career, be in the community, almost everything that we aim to do is something we have to work with others on. And so the senses are a way to really dig in and work with people in a more intentional, deep, and meaningful way. But it also, in those senses, I have tactics under each one about how to live that sense more fully and utilize it. And it's utilizing it with others, but it's also utilizing it with self. So in each of the senses, I have a section on how to do that sense with self. For instance, one of the hardest for self is appreciate, right? We are often much harder on ourselves than with other people. I also include a section on leadership, how to use that sense in leadership. I embed stories from my life throughout the book to illuminate those, talk about some of the dangers under each of the senses that you want to avoid. So
I'll just have to read it and learn the strategies. Do you think it's difficult, this process that you mapped out, in your experience or through your knowledge of writing the book? Do you think it's difficult to engage those 5 senses in those different environments?
It's challenging because we all show up with our agendas in any interactions. And sometimes our agendas can blind us to what's going on in an interaction. To set aside our agendas long enough to really engage and understand what's happening and learn the other person or people's perspectives is really hard. It's a challenge to set those thoughts aside, our agendas or our feelings, our anxieties, our fears, our concern, or even identities. Sometimes we go into interactions and our identities get in the way of learning what the other person's perspective is or what their thoughts are. I think that when we go in, and I often talk about discovery, think about discovering the other person, what their position is and what their thoughts are, then we, and using the senses to do so, we open up avenues of trust and motivation and engagement that previously aren't open to us. And so I think by using them more intentionally, even when it's hard, it's something you practice throughout life. It's not something you can finish. I know all about these senses because I've written about them and I employ them often, but there are times I still don't do it.
Yeah. Engage and discover the other person. I love that. What book is next? Are you writing another one?
I have another book.
Yes, I want to know. Give us the juice.
So this next one at the moment in my working idea, it's called Purposeful Leadership. I've been doing some interviews with leaders because I want to have other people's stories in this as well. The idea of purposeful leadership, the way I'm talking about it, is purposeful as in intentional and purposeful as in filled with purpose. So kind of a play on those. That's what I'm currently working on. I could shift and evolve as I work on it, as did the 5 senses, but that's where I'm at today. So
excellent. We're excited to hear and see that one come out. Nice. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your story, and God bless you in the next book and your journey and your grandbabies. That's so wonderful. I don't have any yet, but I will. Just from the shine on your face, I see it's a good thing. Yeah.
I love it. And thank you. And God bless you. And God bless all the listeners as well. I really appreciate you having me here today.
Thank you, Julie.